Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is about this beautiful black Sailor King of Pen Ebonite. So this is an Ebonite King of Pen, and it is the 1911 shape. The King of Pen also comes in the Pro Gear model, but this one is the cigar-shaped 1911 version. And I will be comparing with this my lovely Pelikan M1000, the regular black. Two flagships of two different companies, and that is going to be what I talk about in this video. So if you are, you're just curious and want to learn about flagship pens, this is the video for you. If that's the stuff you like, remember to like, subscribe, and comment down below on these two pens. So I got this pen from my friend Manny on Instagram. I was talking with him about how I would love to feel a King of Pen and experience one for the first time. And he has one, and he wanted to also experience a Pelikan M1000. So we both had these two pens in our collections, and so I talked about a swap with him. And so we swapped pens with each other. He got to experience my Pelikan M1000 for about like 3-4 weeks. And then I told him, I think it would be a really good idea if I compared the two pens together instead of just like sharing this pen. So that's what I will be doing today. I will share how this pen, the specs of this pen, how it compares with other pens, and do a writing sample and compare the writing sample with my M1000. If you have either of these pens, let me know down in the comments how you like yours. This video isn't just about my experience of it. If you also have experience, please put them down below. All right, so without further ado, let's switch the camera around and take a look at these, this gorgeous Sailor King of Pen. So again, this is the 1911 version. It is the cigar shape one. There is the regular Pro Gear King of Pen, which has the flat top. So the 1911 will be longer, but this one is made of ebonite, and it doesn't have metal parts on the cap ring area, so that would make this one slightly lighter, I think, than the flat top King of Pen, because that one has a very relatively heavier cap band. So this ebonite Sailor King of Pen comes with gold trims, and that is the typical Sailor clip. I believe it is, it's not terribly stiff, but it is stiffer than some clips. And it is basically black all over. But again, Sailor King of Pens come in all different colors and variety. We're gonna uncap, see how many rotations. 1, 2, about 2 1/4. So that's quite a lot, which means that this pen would seal pretty well. I believe most sailors are about 2 cap rotations, and I think sailors and platinums are one of the best at ensuring that inks do not dry out. Okay, so the Pro Gear is about 1 3/4 of a turn, or 1 3/4 turns. This is 2 1/4. The King of Pens cap, it does have a plastic inner cap. It's going to keep your ink from drying out really, really well. Once we open that, we get to see the gorgeous Sailor King of Pen nib. It is a very, very big nib in comparison to most like number 5 and number 6 nibs out there. It does, it's definitely really big and long. I'm not that close to the surface. So this nib is dual toned. I don't think all Sailor nibs are going to be dual toned, but I think the dual tone nibs are so beautiful. And they are harder to make. I mean, just because it's a gold nib, so it will be gold, but they'd have to plate it with silver or rhodium, whatever the material is. Okay, so the nib does say 21K, and 875, which is the gold content, and it's got the Sailor Anchor logo there. Now this is a medium nib, so the medium is usually on the left side of the nib, or the nib size is usually on the left side. And the feed here is made of plastic. So it's a plastic feed. This grip section is pretty girthy. It is very comfortable to hold. And the threads here are not sharp, but I can definitely feel the ridges. Yeah, it's not sharp at all. Like, it's very, very comfy. It's got a little bit of a flare here at the end of the grip section, so it will kind of stop you. It's not a really hard stopping flare, which I think is nice. I like that it's subtle. And then this is a cartridge converter. Sailor King of Pen is not an internal piston filler. They come with a well, I don't know if this one came with a converter. This is my own converter. I asked Manny to, not send his because I have so many. But I'm not sure if the converter came with the pen, because he did buy directly from Japan. And typically when you buy directly from Japan, it has no warranty. It is, in the gray market, and they typically don't come with a converter. But if you buy this pen from, say, a retailer, even then I'm not even sure if a converter comes with it, because that's the one thing I dislike about Sailor. You never know if you're going to get a converter, but I feel like for pens this expensive from Sailor that the converter basically should just come with it. When you open the barrel, you'll see the section here where the cartridge converter goes in is made up of metal, which is where most of the weight is centered towards the front. This barrel isn't that heavy. It's also not like light plastic at all. This is very substantial quality ebonite, and even if it's the regular resin one, I think it'll feel pretty substantial, because this pen is a bit on the heavy side. It's about as heavy as the Pelikan M1000, which is pretty amazing for a cartridge converter pen. They definitely put a lot of material in here to give it the flagship weight. And then let's take a look at the comparison between the King of Pen and the Pelikan M1000. So look at that. The King of Pen is longer just because it's the 1911 version. If it's the Pro Gear size, I think it would be exactly the same length as an M1000 because it's a flat top. And then looking at these two nibs, I believe the M1000 feels like it's bigger, and it probably is, but they're generally around about the same size. So if we look at that, the M1000 is a lot, it feels bigger. But, and even the diameter, well, the diameter seems to be about the same. So they're both probably like number 8 nibs. And the Sailor King of Pen over here is about the same size as the Montblanc 149 nib. So they're both pretty big. And when we're writing with them, you're kind of far from the paper, which is, to some people that's probably uncomfortable or weird, but for some it's very nice and comfy. Same thing for the Pelikan M1000. It's so nice and far from the paper that it gives you such an amazingly different experience. Both the King of Pen and the Pelikan M1000, that Pelikan is the correct German way to say pelican. But anyways, tangent aside, both of these weigh about the same. This one is the King of Pen is about 34 grams, and the Pelikan M1000 is also 33 to 34 grams uninked. I have no ink in here. The King of Pen does have the converter in there, so that gives it a little bit more weight. So total right now is about 34 grams, but I think without the converter, it'll be about 32 to 33 grams. And then let's just take a look at the King of Pen and compare it with some other pens that are pretty popular, or that I have that are kind of on the higher, like middle range of cost that most of you guys might have. There's only a few pens actually. So here's the Lamy 2000, the Pilot Custom 823, and then the Pelikan M1000. So you can see that it's still larger than the Pilot Custom A23. So now I will compare them all unposted, because these are pretty large pens that you can write with them unposted, and typically I would suggest writing with these larger pens unposted anyways. So you can see there, unposted, they're all relatively the same in length, which is a good thing, because this is probably the comfortable length to write with in your hands, because you know, especially for people with like average to smaller hand size, this is pretty good. If you have larger hands, then if your Sailor King of Pen can post, then that's completely up to you to post it if you have larger hands. But for me, I have like medium to small size hands, and these pens fit really well in my hands, unposted. So there's that comparison for you guys. Okay, now let's take a look at the writing sample, and then I will compare this medium nib with my Pelikan, my Pilot Custom A23, and my Lamy, so that you guys can see the difference in the line widths of each pen to get a rough estimate of what nib size you might want in a Sailor Pro Gear, or Sailor King of Pen. So I have in here an ink that my friend Manny also gave me a sample of. It is the Sailor Manyo, I think it's their 5th anniversary of Manyo inks, and it is the U or Sunset. So it's a gorgeous ink you'll see here. All right, so this is the Sailor. I absolutely love the way this nib shows off shading. It's just so good. I believe the shading is just effortless because of, obviously, you know, the paper needs to be good fountain pen paper to show off shading, but this nib is very wet. The Sailor King of Pen is very wet. The flow is great. I believe this ink is also pretty wet. So again, this ink is Sailor Manyo 5th anniversary U or Sunset. I don't know if you guys can see that shading like I can. Oh, that is just so beautiful. Love the darker shades of this, like terracotta-y reddish brown, reddish brown, orange. It's lots of shades in there, and then the lighter shades right there. Beautiful. I love that in an ink. Okay, so let's do some line variation tests here. I'm not sure if I'm low in ink. I probably am, but there's a bit of a, you can see there, railroading. But this nib is somewhat soft. Yeah, but it's not the softest. It's not as soft as the Pelikan M1000. And it doesn't have as much line variation as well because this is a medium nib. But it writes perfectly from all angles. So this nib is tuned really well. The lightest effort. When I write really lightly, I write ugly. But like it writes on its own weight, as all fountain pens should, but on top of that, it writes very, very wet with a light touch. And so if you put more pressure into it, you're going to get very, very wet lines. So that's an amazing different experience with the Sailor King of Pen. I personally don't like super wet gushers, but here's the thing about the Sailor King of Pen. It is wet, but it's not juicy gusher. Like it doesn't spill ink onto the paper. It's a really controlled wetness. which is amazing. And this nib is extremely smooth. So if you love a smooth experience that shows off shading, I think the Sailor King of Pen does that really, really well. I do know that just from my time with this King of Pen that the experience is a lot different from a Pro Gear. So I definitely want one in my collection now. So if we compare this with a Pro Gear Medium, it's the same nib size. So this is... And when we compare the Pro Gear and the King of Pen Medium, I do think that the King of Pen is just slightly thicker and definitely a lot wetter, which makes a lot of sense. The nib is a lot bigger, but they're both 21 karat, and so the softness of their nibs should be about the same. However, the King of Pen is a larger nib too, so that lends itself to being a little bit softer. But in terms of its bounciness, both pens are about the same amount of bounciness. They're a bit on the stiff side with some bounce, which I prefer. If you don't prefer a pen that's stiffer, yeah, actually, the King of Pen has about twice the amount of bounciness of the the Pro Gear. Okay, now let's compare the King of Pen. I will compare it with these three other pens, the Custom 823, Lamy 2000, and the Pelikan M1000. This is a medium nib from Pilot. Oh, wow. The Custom 823 medium is roughly the same width as the Pro Gear and the King of Pen medium, so they're all pretty thick. You've already known from my past videos that the Pilot Custom 823 medium is a really thick writer, and it's on par with a Pro Gear and a King of Pen medium. In terms of its bounciness, it's a stiff bouncy. It's not too bouncy. The 14 karat Pilot Custom 823 medium I have not found to be a bouncy nib, which I really like. If it's too bouncy, that's just too much for me. All right. Now let's look at the Lamy 2000 Fine. All right, so I just re-inked up my Lamy 2000 with Takesumi ink, which I usually like to have in there. It's a black pen and black ink. I do match my inks with my pens, and so it's kind of where the black inks will go. All right, so this is Lamy 2000. This is the fine nib. And you can already see that this Lamy 2000 Fine writes almost like the medium pens up here, just slightly thinner. And then I will also take a look at the Pelikan M1000. This is an extra fine because I cannot deal with anything larger than that on a M1000. So I'm just going to dip it into the Sailor Manual U so that we can compare that directly with the King of Pen. So the Pelikan M1000, it's so wet. And that's why I said earlier the King of Pen is a controlled wetness, because once it's on the paper, it'll dry pretty quickly. But the Pelikan, the ink takes a long time to dry, even for an extra fine. All of these pen are smooth as butter. The with the Pro Gear being the least smooth of all of these, but they're so smooth. If you want smooth pens, these are the contenders for smooth writing, at least of my collection. Very smooth writing, very wet. I think these were some very good pens to choose to compare it with. The lines are all pretty similar, with the exception of the Pelikan M1000. It is a little bit finer, but that's because it is without any pressure to it. This is what you get with an extra fine, which almost looks like a Lamy 2000 fine. Okay, now let's take a look at some of my thoughts on the pros and cons of the King of Pen. I think that the King of Pen is a really wet writer. But it is well controlled. It is, yeah, it's really nice. It doesn't have a lot of feedback like the Pro Gears or Pro Gear Slims. So if you like that, I think that's a pro to the King of Pen. So smooth and less feedback. The feedback is still there, but it's really lovely. It's very soft sounding. Yeah, I say that it is definitely a different writing experience from the Pro Gear model and the Pro Gear Slims. So I know it kind of sucks that you have to spend so much money just to get a smoother experience with Sailor, but that's just how it is with Sailor. 3, it's comfortable. So this pen is comfortable because the girth section is really thick, and the pen unposted is a good length, and pretty good weight, I would say. It might be a little heavy for some people, but 24 grams is really, it's not bad. Very large nib. I feel like it's just so effortless for this large nib to show shading. And then, of course, because it's larger, it's slightly bouncy as well, so you can get some line variation out of this nib if you love doing that when you write. So I do like that. That's really nifty. And you can just see how beautiful that, I just love this amber color so much when I, get the lighter shades from this nib. That I just love that so much about this King of Pen nib. All right, 5. I think it's pretty affordable if you buy it from the gray market or directly from Japan. Like I said earlier, I think he got it for 500. That's pretty good for this pen. If I can get a King of Pen between 300 and 500, that's a great steal. I will do it. Without a warranty. I don't care for the warranty if I can get this for $350 or something like that. If you don't mind cleaning cartridge converters, and those are easiest for you, then I would say that that would be a pro of this pen. It is a cartridge converter filler pen, and so all you have to do is take out the converter, and then you can use a bulb syringe to just blast water through the the feed section and clean out the nib that way. I know that it's not as easy as cleaning a Pelikan, that you can just unscrew the nib unit. I think that's the easiest way, but cartridge converters are pretty easy to clean as well. So I'll add that it has a very nice, unique writing experience. It's still pretty precise for a medium nib. It is wet, but it's not a gushing wetness. And it's also very smooth, which is very, very different from a lot of my Pro Gears, where it's like I can feel the texture as I'm writing, and there's just, it's a totally different experience, but I don't dislike it. I like it quite a lot, actually. So King of Pen is next on my wish list, or adding to my wish list. So some cons for this pen, they can get relatively very expensive. I know that King of Pens can range between 500 and like even 900, just depending on the model. If you're getting the most basic model, you'll probably be spending 550 to 600 on a retailer. This ebonite version, I think, is about $800 to $900 at the retail shop. It is not a cheap pen. Do I think it's worth it for this? All the pros on here. At $900 at retail shop, this pen, I will say, is not worth it. Unfortunately. But like I said earlier, if you do want this stuff at a cheaper price or at a less expensive price, then it is worth it if you can forego warranties and stuff like that. But again, if you can afford it at $900, I do think that these are really lovely experiences to have in a King of Pen, but it is not necessary to have a King of Pen experience for $900. At this price level, being a flagship pen, that people would prefer the King of Pen to be an internal piston filler, which, you know, some can argue that that is something that you should get for the price you're paying, and others don't mind it. I think that does make me question where all of the cost is going. Is most of that $900 in this pen for the nib, or is it the resin? Because other pens from Sailor is just PMMA resin, which is plastic. This ebonite is also partially plastic materials, and so it makes you, question, why am I paying $900 for just the nib if the resin itself isn't that much expensive or isn't too expensive? And so, yeah, it really makes you question, and me personally, why should I spend $900 on this pen, not internal piston filler? And then a third con is that you can only get the King of Pen in a medium or broad nib. So there's not a lot of options for the King of Pen. If you want much thinner nib on your King of Pen, you're going to have to get this grounded yourself, which will void your warranty if you have a warranty with the Sailor. But either way, Sailor only has 1-year warranty. So after a year, if you want a much thinner line writing experience than the medium or broad, after a year, you can get your nib grounded. If you have a King of Pen that has been grounded, let me know how that writing experience has been. I would love to know, and it might be good for the rest of the community too, if you have that experience, to share about it. So put that down in the comment if you do have a King of Pen with a nib grind lower than a medium. Those are my thoughts on this King of Pen experience. I absolutely love the writing experience. It is completely different from what I'm used to, what I like, but I also like it. I don't dislike it. But if you were to ask me, do I like the Pelikan M1000 or the Sailor King of Pen more? I think I like the Pelikan more. The writing experience is more my style because it is a lot thinner. Like, you can write thinner lines with an extra fine, but I enjoy them both equally, with the Pelikan being just slightly more. So, yeah, whenever you question yourself, should I get the King of Pen? Should I get the M1000? Should I get the Montblanc 149? So I would say that I prefer the Pelikan M1000, but I like both of their writing experiences. They're very different. All right, well, final thoughts. Do I recommend the Sailor King of Pen? If you like what I said about the pros here, and you can see how surprised I was and how much I enjoyed it, then I do recommend this King of Pen to be in your collection if you value and you like these stuff. Otherwise, it's not necessary in your collection. You know, like how people always say that you gotta at least have the Lamy 2000 in your collection. You can argue about that too, like, but this is about the King of Pen, and I don't think that it is completely necessary in anybody's collection. Again, like I said, I want it now because I love this experience, but I want it in the right design. I don't think I want more than one King of Pen. Like it's not a pen that I would need to collect so many. But later down the line, that could change. Who knows? Anyways, thank you so much for joining me in looking at the Sailor King of Pen. I want to thank Manny for this lovely, lovely pen swap experience. I am so grateful that we both, were able to trust each other enough to send each other our pens and test them out together so that we don't have to buy it first and then know if we want it or not. So this was a great experience. If you have any questions about pen swapping, let me know down in the comments. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.